Ladies and gentlemen, in a world that seems to thrive on drama, criticism, and comparison, protecting your peace of mind is no longer optional. It's essential. Every day, we are bombarded with opinions, judgments, and subtle cues that challenge our self. But what if your mind could be trained, conditioned to deflect this constant noise? What if you could walk through storms and still remain calm, focused, and in control? Understanding the psychology of negativity is essential to building a mind that is resilient, focused, and emotionally intelligent. Negativity is not just something we encounter from other people. It is often a process that begins and intensifies within our own thoughts. It's easy to assume that negative energy comes from the outside world, but the real danger lies in how our mind processes, stores, and recycles those inputs. When we hear criticism, when we face rejection, or when we fail, our brain naturally gravitates toward protecting us from future harm. Unfortunately, this protection often takes the form of negative thoughts, self-doubt, fear, anxiety, or even withdrawal. This is a survival mechanism hardwired through thousands of years of evolution. The brain is programmed to scan for threats. In ancient times, these threats were physical, like predators or starvation. But in modern society, threats are mostly emotional and social. A sarcastic comment, a disapproving look, a failed exam, or even a social media post can trigger the same stress responses that once helped our ancestors avoid death. The problem is, these triggers are now constant. We are rarely in physical danger, but our minds still act as if we are under siege. Negative thinking thrives in uncertainty. The brain, when unsure, fills in the gaps with imagined scenarios, most of them pessimistic. This is called negativity bias. It means that we are biologically more sensitive to negative stimuli than to positive ones. A person can receive 10 compliments and 1 insult, yet the insult is what dominates their memory and affects their self-perception. This is not weakness, it's biology. But just because something is natural doesn't mean it's beneficial. Left untrained, the mind will continue to fall into these traps, reacting with fear, resentment, or self-sabotage. That's why understanding these psychological mechanisms is so important. Once you become aware of how your brain works, you stop being a victim to its pattern. You start becoming the observer instead of the reactor. The first step to reversing this mental programming is self-awareness. Most people live their lives without observing their thoughts. They believe every thought they think is true. But not every thought deserves attention. Not every fear is based in reality. Many of the thoughts we think are simply echoes of past experiences, internalized voices from childhood or unconscious reactions to stress. When you pause and question your thoughts instead of following them blindly, you take back control of your mind. You begin to understand that a thought is just that, a thought. It's not you. It's not your destiny, and it doesn't have to define your decision. The second component is emotional regulation. This means understanding that emotions are temporary. You may feel overwhelmed, sad, angry, or anxious, but these emotions rise and fall like waves. They are messengers, not masters. When you observe them without judgment, they lose their power. You begin to see a pattern. You start to notice that certain environments, people, or triggers lead to predictable emotional responses. This awareness creates space. And in that space, you find the power to choose your response rather than being controlled by the impulse. Negativity, at its core, is a belief in limitation. Limitation of what you are capable of, what you deserve, and what is possible. When you start challenging those beliefs, you weaken negativity's hold. You begin to replace fear with curiosity, doubt with self-inquiry, and anxiety with strategy. Understanding how negativity works doesn't mean you'll never feel down again, but it does mean you'll never be trapped by it, because now you know the rules of the game. And once you know the rules, you can learn how to win. The power of perception and response lies at the very heart of a bulletproof mindset. It is not what happens to you that shapes your inner world, but how you perceive and respond to it. This concept may seem simple, but it is transformative once truly understood and practiced. Human beings are meaning-making creatures. We are constantly interpreting reality through the lens of our beliefs, past experiences, emotional states, and expectations. Two people can go through the same event and walk away with entirely different interpretations. One feeling empowered, the other feeling broken. The difference is not in the event itself, but in how it was perceived and mentally framed. Perception is not passive, it is an active process. Your brain filters information through a system of mental shortcuts called cognitive biases. These biases help you make quick decisions, but they can also distort your sense of reality. For example, the confirmation bias causes you to focus on information that supports your existing beliefs while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. If you believe that people can't be trusted, you will notice every betrayal and overlook every act of kindness. Over time, your perception becomes your reality, even if that reality is incomplete or untrue. This is why it is essential to constantly challenge your perceptions and ask yourself whether they are helping or harming your peace of mind. What follows perception is response. Response is where your power lies. You cannot control what others say or do, but you can absolutely control how you respond. There is a critical space between stimulus and response. It is in this space that you choose your reaction. You can respond with anger, fear, defensiveness, or you can respond with calm, curiosity, and confidence. The quality of your life depends on how you use that space. In fact, that space is where maturity, wisdom, and strength are cultivated. Every time you resist the urge to react impulsively and instead pause, reflect, and choose deliberately, you reinforce your mental resilience. Reacting is automatic. It's emotional. It's often a reflection of unresolved wounds and insecurities. Responding, on the other hand, is conscious. It comes from a place of awareness, patience, and emotional regulation. For example, when someone criticizes you, your automatic reaction might be to get defensive or feel hurt. But a conscious response could be to pause and consider whether the criticism has any value or whether it's simply a projection of the other person's issues. You get to decide whether to take it personally or let it go. This doesn't make you passive, it makes you powerful. Building the skill of perception and response begins with mindfulness. You need to become the watcher of your own thoughts. Notice when your mind jumps to conclusions. Observe when your emotions begin to rise. Breathe before you speak. Reflect before you act. These small pauses create space, and in that space, clarity is born. You begin to see the truth that you are not a puppet pulled by every external string, but a conscious being capable of navigating life with grace and intentionality. There will always be challenges. People will misunderstand you, disappoint you, even try to bring you down. But with the power of perception and response, you no longer react like a victim. You respond like a leader. You learn to bend without breaking, to stand firm without becoming bitter, and to speak with strength without raising your voice. This is not weakness. It is mastery. It is the quiet confidence that comes from knowing that while you can't control everything that happens, you can always control what it means and what you choose to do next. That is the foundation of a bulletproof mind. Mental conditioning through daily habits is one of the most practical and powerful tools for developing a bulletproof mindset. While many people wait for motivation or inspiration to strike, those who are mentally strong understand that consistency builds strength far more effectively than occasional bursts of inspiration. The brain is not just a vessel for thought. It is a muscle that can be trained. And just like physical strength, mental strength is developed through repeated effort, routine, and deliberate practice. Habits are the building blocks of your mindset. Every small action you take, every thought you allow, every decision you make, it all compounds over time. If you consistently feed your mind fear, doubt, and complaints, you train it to see life through the lens of weakness and scarcity. But if you condition your mind with intention by choosing thoughts that empower you, habits that discipline you, and routines that ground you, you begin to develop an unshakable internal foundation. This foundation is what allows you to stay calm in chaos and focused when distractions and negativity surround you. One of the most effective mental habits is beginning your day with a clear intention. Before the world throws its noise at you, take time to center your mind. Whether it's through prayer, journaling, meditation, or simply sitting in silence, that early moment of reflection acts. It's where you remind yourself of your values, your goals, and who you want to be today. This habit, though simple, trains your brain to respond to the day from a proactive state instead of a reactive one. It sets the tone and filters your focus. Gratitude is another powerful mental habit. When you make it a daily practice, to identify what is good even in the midst of difficulty, you train your brain to seek opportunities instead of problems. Gratitude rewires the neural pathways in your brain to recognize abundance, joy, and hope. And over time, this becomes your default setting. You stop dwelling on what's missing and start building on what's already present. This doesn't mean ignoring pain. It means refusing to let pain define your outlook. Equally important is the habit of feeding your mind with positive, educational, and growth-focused content. The books you read, the podcasts you listen to, the voices you allow into your mind. All of these shape your thinking. The mind left unchecked is easily influenced by negativity. Social media, news, and toxic conversations can infiltrate your thought life and create patterns of anxiety, anger, or hopelessness. But when you deliberately choose to consume uplifting, thought-provoking, and purpose-driven material, you are training your brain to operate from a higher frequency. Another habit that conditions mental strength is doing difficult things. This could be through physical training, cold showers, disciplined fasting, or pursuing uncomfortable conversations. When you challenge yourself regularly, your brain learns to tolerate stress. It becomes familiar with discomfort and stops interpreting it as danger. This is key to developing resilience. You don't become mentally tough by avoiding hard things. You become tough by facing them and realizing that you can handle them. Over time, your brain learns that discomfort is not a threat, it's a teacher. Sleep, nutrition, and physical health also play a huge role in mental conditioning. A tired, malnourished, and sedentary body produces a weak and foggy mind. On the other hand, a well-rested and physically active body supports mental clarity, emotional balance, and inner stability. These physical habits are not separate from mental training. They are part of it. In the end, your habits define your mindset more than any single event or decision. You don't rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your habits. So if you want a bulletproof mind, don't just think about it. Train for it. Every single emotional boundaries and energy management are fundamental components of a bulletproof mindset because they protect your mental clarity, emotional balance, and spiritual strength. In today's hyper-connected and overstimulated world, people are constantly exposed to a flood of voices, opinions, demands, and distractions. Without firm boundaries in place, you can easily find yourself overwhelmed, drained, or even manipulated by the emotional states of others. A person with a strong mind understands that peace is not something you stumble upon. It is something you create and protect through conscious decision. Emotional boundaries begin with the understanding that not everything deserves your emotional involvement. Just because someone is upset doesn't mean you have to be. Just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean you must change your truth. Emotional boundaries are the invisible lines that separate your emotional experiences from the experiences of others. They allow you to hold space for compassion without absorbing chaos. This is not a lack of empathy. It is a preservation of strength. If you let everyone's problems live in your mind, you will soon lose the ability to deal with your own life effectively. One of the biggest challenges to mental resilience is emotional entanglement. When you let toxic people, manipulative relationships, or draining conversations dominate your inner space, you give away power that could be used to build yourself up. Learning to say no without guilt is one of the most powerful emotional boundaries you can develop. No is not rejection, no is protection. It is a way of telling yourself that your time, energy, and well-being. People with weak boundaries often say yes to avoid conflict, to be liked, or to feel needed. But every yes you give out of fear is a no to your own peace. A bulletproof mindset requires that you say yes with intention and no with conviction. Energy management is closely connected to emotional boundaries. Your energy is a limited resource. Every thought you entertain, every person you engage with, every task you take on uses up a portion of that energy. If you don't manage it wisely, you will end up exhausted, scattered, and reactive. Begin by identifying what recharges you and what depletes you. Who are the people in your life who energize you, support your growth, and bring clarity? And who are the ones who consistently leave you feeling confused, guilty, or drained? These patterns reveal more than words ever will. Pay attention. Your emotional responses are your mind's way of guiding you toward or away from something. Honor those signals. Another aspect of energy management is learning to protect your input. What you watch, read, scroll through, and listen to has a powerful influence on your mood and mindset. Doom scrolling, news, gossip-filled conversations, or fear-driven content can create a baseline of anxiety and helplessness in your nervous system. If you want a bulletproof mind, you must guard your mental diet with the same seriousness you would guard your physical health. Feed your brain with hope, solutions, truth, and inspiration. Not because you're avoiding reality, but because you're preparing to face it with strength and clarity. Detachment is also a part of emotional boundary work. This doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It means learning to observe without absorbing. When someone lashes out, you can notice it without taking it personally. When chaos erupts around you, you can stay centered by refusing to internalize what isn't yours. The ability to detach, reflect, and respond mindfully is a sign of maturity and inner mastery. Ultimately, protecting your energy and setting emotional boundaries is not selfish. It is responsible. It allows you to show up in the world with greater presence, purpose, and power. When your energy is managed and your boundaries are intact, you stop reacting to life and start creating it. And that is the essence of a bulletproof mind. Reframing failure and criticism as fuel is a crucial mindset shift for anyone seeking to build emotional resilience and inner strength. Failure and criticism are often misunderstood. Most people fear them, avoid them, or allow them to define their self-worth. But when you look deeper, both are opportunities for growth, powerful feedback mechanisms that, if approached with the right mindset, can accelerate your personal development faster than any success ever could. A bulletproof mindset does not eliminate failure or criticism. It transforms them into tools. It takes what most people run from and uses it as a foundation to rise. Failure is not the opposite of success. It is a part of it. Every meaningful achievement is built upon countless failures that taught, refined, and shaped the person behind it. Whether it's in business, relationships, education, or personal goals. Failure carries the most valuable lessons because it reveals what doesn't work, where weaknesses lie, and what must be changed. But the way you interpret failure matters more than the failure itself. If you see it as proof that you're not good enough, you'll retreat. But if you see it as a stepping stone, you'll continue forward with more clarity and determination. This shift in interpretation is everything. The same principle applies to criticism. Most people take criticism personally because they confuse feedback with identity. They hear you did something wrong and translate it into you are something wrong. This distortion is what causes shame, self-doubt, and defensiveness. But a bulletproof mind knows how to separate the message from the emotion. It listens for truth without absorbing poison. Constructive criticism, even when delivered harshly, often contains a seed of value. The mentally strong person extracts that value and discards the venom. They do not let tone blind them to the truth, nor do they let negativity take root where purpose should grow. Criticism can be external, coming from others, or internal, coming from the voice inside your own head. Learning how to deal with both is essential. The internal critic is often harsher than any external voice. It tells you you're not smart enough, strong enough, or worthy enough. If left unchallenged, this inner dialogue becomes your default reality. The key is to question the voice. Where did it come from? Who taught you to think this way? Is it based on truth or fear? When you start dismantling the lies embedded in your internal narrative, you create space for a stronger, wiser, more compassionate voice to take over. Another powerful aspect of reframing is recognizing that failure often builds character in ways success cannot. It teaches humility, patience, perseverance, and empathy. It forces you to confront your ego, adjust your strategy, and sometimes start over. These are not signs of weakness. They are marks of growth. Every successful person has a behind-the-scenes story of mistakes, rejection, and moments of deep doubt. What separates them from those who gave up isn't talent, it's perspective. They used failure as data, not as a definition of who they are. Reframing is not denial. It's not pretending everything is fine when it's not. It's choosing to see things through a lens that empowers rather than cripples you. It's understanding that failure hurts, but it also heals if you let it. Criticism stings, but it also sharpens if you let it. When you approach these experiences with curiosity instead of fear, you become a student of life rather than a victim of it. To live with a bulletproof mindset is not to avoid difficulty. It is to use it, to turn failure into feedback, criticism into clarity, and pain into power. Every scar can become a symbol of survival, every mistake a lesson, every insult a test of self-mastery. The more you reframe, the stronger your foundation becomes. Eventually, failure no longer feels like an end, but a beginning. And criticism no longer feels like an attack, but an invitation to become better, sharper, and more unstoppable. Building inner fortitude through purpose is perhaps the most essential component of developing a bulletproof mindset. Without purpose, even the smallest challenge can feel overwhelming. With purpose, even the greatest storm can be endured. Purpose gives pain. It transforms obstacles into stepping stones and gives you a reason to keep moving when everything else in life tries to pull you down. When you know why you're doing what you're doing, you become anchored. That anchor holds you steady when distractions, temptations, or negativity try to sway your direction. Purpose is more than just a goal or ambition. It's a deep, often spiritual understanding of who you are and what you're meant to contribute to the world. It doesn't always have to be grand or world-changing. It can be something personal and quiet. The desire to raise your children with love, to help others heal, to live with integrity, or to express your creativity. The point is not how big it is, but how true it feels. When purpose resonates with your soul, it becomes a source of energy that doesn't burn out easily. You stop relying on outside validation to keep going because the drive comes from within. Inner strength is built when you align your daily actions with that inner calling. Each time you choose purpose over comfort, clarity over confusion, and discipline over distraction, you reinforce the message that your life has direction. This consistency builds trust in yourself. You begin to walk with a quiet confidence, not because life is easy, but because your path is clear. Challenges stop feeling like punishment and start feeling like preparation. You understand that life isn't just happening to you, it's working through you. One of the most powerful things purpose does is help you filter out the world. It's full of opinions, expectations, and comparisons. Without purpose, you are vulnerable to all of it. You will bend to every critic, chase every trend, and lose yourself trying to please others. But when you are deeply connected to your purpose, you start to see which voices matter and which don't. You become less reactive and more selective. You no longer need to prove yourself to people who don't understand your vision. You realize that the path you're on wasn't meant for them. It was meant for you. There will always be moments of doubt. Even with purpose, you will face failure, criticism, and exhaustion. But the difference is that purpose reminds you why you started. It gives you a compass when the road ahead seems uncertain. It becomes the reason you stand up one more time after being knocked down. It's the fuel that keeps your fire alive, even when no one else can see the flame. Purpose also builds resilience because it